Hello and welcome to Kettle and Bones, where we make really delicious, really healthy food. And you can too. Today we commemorate the end of an age. Not a long or especially remarkable age, at least not in the cosmic sense, but it has been an age of flavor and, dare I say, an age of fun. The Pork Age, tucked right into history's pages after stone, bronze, and iron, but before hyper-intelligent dolphins. We started with this impressive, and I'm not ashamed to say, mildly intimidating whole pork loin. Together we overcame our fears and divided it into 3 separate roasts, making first some fantastically tender and juicy pork chops, second some explosively flavorful braised hot and sour country ribs, and third, whatever it is we're doing today with the center cut of the loin. Well, whatever it is we're doing today with the center cut of the loin begins now. We're making an herbed rolled pork roast. Let's get cooking. Here it is, the center cut of our pork loin. Still every bit as beautiful as the day we met. We could cook it just like this, like a whole roast, in the oven, maybe season the outside, make a nice sauce to go with it. Nothing wrong with that. But this is a pretty thick hunk of meat, and the technique we're going to use today will allow us to season more of it. Let me show you. We're going to butterfly this, unrolling and flattening it out, which will allow us to crank up the seasoning to meat ratio in a way that we just couldn't do with one solid piece of meat. With the fat cap side of the loin facing down and the leaner side facing up, we're taking a sharp knife and holding it so it's parallel to the counter surface, cutting horizontally down the long edge of the loin. I'm just going a little bit at a time. I want the meat below the knife blade to be about half as thick as the meat that's above the knife blade. Think of it this way. It's like unrolling a rolled up yoga mat. How would you do that? You just hold the outer edge and unroll it. You just kind of peel it away from itself. Now, imagine that a nuclear explosion has fused your yoga mat into one solid piece. You could try to peel it apart, hoping that the layers aren't completely stuck together. But if that didn't work, you'd have to cut along where the separation should be, so it comes out as flat and uniformly thick as possible. Make sense? And that's what we're doing here. Don't think of this as cutting so much as it is blade-assisted unrolling. Go slow and easy, there's no rush. I actually did have a little section here where the connective tissue gave way a bit, but this won't be a problem. I'll just roll it up on the inside. All in all, not too bad. This is a pretty uniform thickness, a little bumpy here and there, but we can take care of that right now. Covering with plastic wrap to prevent pork splatter, I'm going to pound this out until it's all one uniform thickness. I'm using a rolling pin. A heavy pan would also work, or a bat, a club, a bowling ball, a mace, as long as it doesn't have spikes on it. You get the idea. Whatever it is you have around your kitchen. All right, this is good. I don't know why they call this technique butterflying. It doesn't look like any butterfly I've ever seen around the garden. Can you imagine? Ugh. Let's set that to the side for now because it's time to make our filling. There are so many things you could use to fill a pork roll like this. I've seen recipes for pork rolls that are stuffed with all kinds of seasonings, ham, bacon, sausage, cheeses, pâté. I mean, the sky is truly the limit. So keep that in mind. There really aren't any wrong answers as long as you like it. As tempting as it sounds to stuff this pork with even more pork, I'm actually going to just go with a light, fresh garlic and herb mixture. I just feel like something a little bit less heavy for this one, you know? In a small food processor or blender, we're adding just a bunch of cloves of garlic. Some roughly chopped shallots. This is 3 medium-sized shallots. 1 jalapeno with the seeds and white interior removed. I want a little kick, but not too much spice. And now we're going to add tons of fresh, pork-friendly herbs. I'm starting with parsley, just pulling the leaves off, roughly. Next, I'm adding rosemary. Rosemary has quite a woody stem, so I have to make sure I'm just adding the leaves only. Pulling down the stem against the grain of the leaves is the quickest way to remove them. And also some fresh thyme. Same as the rosemary, woody stem, leaves only, pull along the stem against the grain. I'm going to add a generous pour of olive oil. We've got a lot in this container, so I'm sure I'll need to add more as we go, but this is a good start. And now we're blending, or processing, whatever. Pulse to get things going. Mix things up. Add more oil. And repeat until you get a fairly uniform paste that smells like heaven's back garden. So good. It's almost where I want it to be texture-wise. I'm going to add just a little freshly ground black pepper and a sprinkle of salt, just a bit to enhance all these great herb flavors. With our garlic herb paste done, let's turn back to our pork. The paste is going to go inside the roll and it will season every bite beautifully. We also want a little seasoning on the outside of the roll, so I'm going to carefully flip this over and generously add fresh pepper and salt. Flipping back over again, and let's add our filling. Spread it out as uniformly as possible, and then carefully, a little at a time, roll this up on itself, being careful not to squeeze anything too hard at any point. Some of the herb paste is going to squirt out, that's just inevitable. Don't worry about it, we're going to use that in a minute. Okay, this is looking good. Now as this cooks in the oven, the heat will cause things to shift and expand and move as juices and meat and fat are being cooked. So to keep this from unrolling, we're going to use butcher's twine to truss this up. Just regular normal knots are fine. Square knots, shoelace knots. Make pretty little bows if you want to. Let's cut off the excess twine, and we have a nicely trussed roll of pork. I'm going to carefully, without squeezing out any of the herbed paste, transfer this to a wire rack in a baking sheet. This needs to be up off the cooking surface if possible, so it's not swimming in its own juices. If you don't have a wire rack for your baking sheet, you can crinkle up a few sheets of tinfoil and set the pork roll on that so that there's some space beneath it for the extra juices to flow. As for the extra herb paste that escaped the inside of the roll, I think you can guess what we're going to do with that. No, are you crazy? No, I'm gonna rub it on the outside of our pork roll. Wow, you're weird. Moving on. This bad boy is ready to go in the oven. 275 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 135 degrees Celsius, for 2 hours. We're going for an internal temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the dead center of the roast. That's about 62 degrees Celsius. I'm stopping just short of the recommended 144 degrees Fahrenheit for pork because, spoiler, we're going to sear this in the pan when it comes out. And that's going to get the internal temperature across the finish line without overcooking and drying it out. Okay, it's been 2 hours exactly. Let's take this out for examination. So nice. Most of our herb fillings stayed in, so that's good. I checked this with a meat thermometer which read 139.8 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's close enough to 140, so this is done in the oven. Next, as I mentioned, we're going to get some nice color on this by searing it. I don't really need it to cook any longer, but I want to get that fat cap a little crisp and bubbly if I can. Definitely want some browning all around the outside. So in a very, very, very hot pan with a little splash of avocado oil, I'm going to pick this up and sear it. Woo, that is hot. We're searing not only the outside of the meat to get that beautiful browning, but we're also searing some of the herbs that are on the outside. You can see some of the herbs have come off and stayed in the pan. These are going to join the flavorful pan sauce that we're about to build. Sear this to your liking, but don't overdo it. Remember, this was already perfectly cooked before. We don't want this drying out. I have now reduced the heat under the pan to medium because it's pan sauce time. We already have some of our garlic and herb mixture in the bottom of the pan. Let's shuffle that around a little. Next, in goes some freshly ground black pepper, and I'm just gonna toast that until it starts to give off that wonderful floral aroma that fills the kitchen. Love that. Next, in goes some chicken stock. I want to coat the bottom of the pan with maybe half a centimeter of chicken stock. That's not a rule, but just keep in mind that the deeper your liquid is, the longer you'll have to let it reduce to get a nice sauce. That's why saucepans are so wide, and conversely, why stock pots are so tall. Our pork roll is going to be juicy, rich, and full of intense garlic, herb, and olive oil flavors. I think today I'm going to go with a bright lemony sauce, but nothing too heavy. So next, in goes the zest of 1 whole lemon. I could have toasted this with the black pepper at the beginning, actually, to deepen and darken the flavor a little, but I didn't, so here it is now. I'm also adding the juice of that very same lemon. I'm going to also add a splash of Pinot Grigio, similar to the sauce we made for our hot and sour country ribs in the second part of this Whole Pork Loin series. Any dry white wine would be okay here. And let's add just a little additional herby goodness here with sprigs of thyme and of rosemary. After about 15 minutes on medium heat, here we are with a nicely reduced sauce. Let's remove the herb sprigs, turn off the heat, and strain this into a separate container. This is going to be a sauce that we drizzle lightly on our pork just to add flavor. I don't want big chunks in there. And again, be sure to scrape the bottom of your strainer for any soft bits that will incorporate well into the sauce for added flavor. Next, as we often do with a nice pan sauce, we're adding some very cold butter and letting that melt very slowly. It won't turn this into a thick gravy or anything, but it will thicken and enrich it slightly. And I want a nice homogeneous emulsion, not an oil slick. So slowly, consistently, just keep mixing this until the butter has melted completely. Let's give that a quick taste. It really has a nice, bright, lemony flavor. It's salty from the chicken stock, but it also has some deeper, darker notes from the toasted herbs and black pepper that we started with. This is going to be a great seasoning on a big, thick slice of our pork roll. Speaking of, yes, let's get into this right here. We need to carefully cut and extract the butcher's twine. It will have cooked into the roast most likely, so don't just yank it, we need to peel it from around the roast. Very nice. This is a fantastic layering of meat, herbs, and a browned and flavorful outside. Let's take a look on the inside. Oh yeah. Look at the variety of marbling that you get in just one slice. This is such a great way to serve a pork loin for exactly this reason. Drizzle on just a little bit of our bright, zesty pan sauce, and this is going to be absolutely exploding with flavor. And I know we usually plate our dishes all pretty, one serving at a time, but I think today, I'm going to leave this right here on the board and just bring the whole roast over to the table to carve it there. Maybe garnish the already sliced pieces with some parsley, and I'll serve the pan sauce at the table too for people to drizzle a little more flavor on. This is a beautiful, delicious main entree that's ready to serve. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our 3-part Whole Pork Loin miniseries. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned some new things, picked up some new ideas, and I hope you stepped outside of your comfort zone a little as we tackled this whole pork loin, one section at a time, and made some fantastically delicious, nutritious dishes. If you followed along and have been cooking these at home, you should feel proud, and hopefully, very full. Stay with Kettle and Bones for many, many more recipe ideas that will hopefully inspire and challenge you in new and different ways that ultimately result in you becoming just a little bit better at nourishing yourself and those you care the most about. But for now, just enjoy your herbed rolled pork roast.